We are live. Hello, humans. Dr. Sarah Happening here with Performances Happening. And today we are doing another interview as part of our Total Worker Health Symposium series, which goes down this month because it's October already. Time flies, man. Okay, today we have Sacha Thompson with us. She's the founder of Equity Equation, a leadership development consultancy focusing on building inclusive, high-performing teams through psychological safety and intentional culture change. She partners with organizations across sectors to equip leaders with the skills to foster trust, accountability, and belonging at every level. I love that. With over 20 years of experience in education, nonprofit, and tech, Sacha is also an ICF Associated Certified Coach, Certified Professional Diversity Coach, and a certified psychological safety and executive culture coach. So fancy.
All the things.
All the things. That's amazing. She has been featured in Forbes, Newsweek, Business Insider, and appeared as a contributor on MSNBC's The Cross Connection. When she's not coaching or facilitating, you can find her watching comedy with her family, enjoying local restaurants, or relaxing near water. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Where's your favorite water body? Do you prefer ocean?
So I'm biased. I'm biased. I was born in Barbados, so I am definitely home is the Caribbean Ocean for me. The Caribbean Sea, I should say, for me.
I love it.
Yes.
Yeah. We went on our first cruise for my father's 80th 2 years ago. And it was my first time being over there. And the color of the water and the sea turtles. And it was just this such beautiful, beautiful sand and turquoise water. I'm so jealous. Yes. I grew up on Lake Superior, which is also beautiful, but not the Caribbean. So
it's not the Caribbean, but like I said, I'm a little biased. So
for sure. And water makes such a difference. I'm here in Denver, Colorado, and the mountains are gorgeous. But when you especially grow up with water, there's something very calming and peaceful about it. We have a pond in our backyard with a waterfall, which is better than nothing, but it's no ocean or lake. Or
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I live in Maryland now and not too far from the water. So anytime I can at least get to see the water, be near the water, is where I find kind of my calm and my peace.
Yeah, I love that. It is super important. Okay, so what inspired you to launch the Equity Equation, and how does your approach differ from traditional DEI work?
Yeah, so great question. First, again, thank you for having me. What made me start the Equity Equation back in 2020 really was twofold. One, I was in an environment, I was working in a tech space that was not psychologically safe for me. I was dealing with a very toxic work environment where it was starting to affect my health. So I had been rushed to the ER 3 times. I had been dealing with ulcers, hair falling out, insomnia, all of these things. And so my doctor had a heart-to-heart and said something needs to change. And so I ended up saying, you know what, let me kind of step back and away from the work that I'm doing. At the same time, or let me step away from this environment. At the same time, I was loving the work that I was doing. And so part of the challenge that I was facing in that work environment was, you operate in this little box. That's all we need you to do is operate in this box. And my experience had been so much more and so much greater. And I honestly had more experience than the leader of our team, of the department. And so having conversations, and if you all remember 2020, we were in the height of COVID. So everyone was working from home. I was having conversations with a couple of my family members, my cousins, and one had been a consultant in the DEI space for over 40 years. So really just spending my time sitting kind of at her feet, talking about the future of this work and what it looked like, talking to my other cousin who had pivoted from being a lawyer to focusing on what brings you joy and doing the whole Marie Kondo thing within the household. And I had this aha of, what brings me joy is helping people understand how they can create environments that work well for them. But what I realized the other side of that was, as much as we can try to do that for ourselves, you need to have environments that are actually ready to do that. And so that's working with leaders, that's working with organizations to create these environments where everyone can thrive. And so that really became the heart of the work of the equity equation.
That's awesome. I love that you mentioned about, it's interesting. We had our interviewee yesterday, Dr. David Daniels. He also mentioned like he does psychosocial hazards, and he was like fitting in this
He's been
box.
on my podcast. I love him.
Oh yeah. No, he was great. And I was like, oh, I'm hearing this again. But from the organizational standpoint, and I know it's very challenging if you go into an organization, and because I know one of the things that you want to do is change culture, and you have to change language, and you have to change. What do you find is like the best place to start when you're working with an organization? Let's just say they're just starting to learn about psychological safety and they want to get started. What's a good way for them to get started with something like that?
So I think the first thing, the senior leadership has to be bought in, right? They have to know and understand we want an environment where everyone feels that they can speak up. And it's not just rhetoric, right? Oh yeah, sure, everyone can speak up. It's the last part of the definition of psychological safety where I think most organizations fail, which is without fear of harm or retribution, right? So if you look at, organizations that say, oh yeah, we have an open door policy, everyone feel free to, say whatever you want to say. But then what people are experiencing is when they speak up, they're left off of projects, or they're being told, well, next time don't speak up. How are we reacting to when people do speak up? Because that then tells us if it is truly a psychologically safe environment, or if it's just one that says, this is what's written on the cafeteria wall. And so that's our culture, regardless of what people are experiencing every single day. So I think leaders have to be bought into creating this environment, which honestly means a lot of self-reflection, and getting a lot of feedback, right? Good, bad, and indifferent about how they show up for everyone that's a part of their team. And I think that for many leaders, it's very difficult for them to look at the data about themselves and how they're showing up. And so that, I think, in the years that I've been doing this work, that has been the aha pinnacle moment of them going from theory around psychological safety to actually seeing the data when it comes to what their teams are experiencing every single day.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, one of the big things is leading by example, but getting that leadership buy-in can really be a challenge depending on the organization and the industry and the humans that are working there and all of that. So I think it would be great if you could share a story of maybe what it was like before, and then how you helped these leaders self-reflect and give them skills that then they can help others.
Yeah, I mean, two immediately come to mind. But the first one was I was actually approached by a small team that was part of a cancer center. And I think there were 12 to 15 people part of the entire team. And they initially reached out to me to do some work around inclusion. And the more and more I started talking to them, I realized it's not inclusion per se that you are having issues with, it's psychological safety. And so what we ended up doing was creating a mini team within the larger team to start to address, like, what is the culture here? What are the things that you all are struggling with? And they found that their communication was something that they were struggling with. And it was funny because even though it was a small team, they had about 4 or 5 different communication channels. And there were some folks on the team that didn't know which communication channel was for what. And there was also this misnomer that certain parts of the team weren't allowed to use certain channels of communication. So, it was clearing the air and making sure that everyone felt and knew, okay, if we're going to communicate, these are the best ways for us to communicate. We also figured out that there were some people are introverts, some people are extroverts, right? So how do you get folks to speak up? And what we ended up doing, the third thing that happened with that group too was we discovered that the leader was one of those leaders, a powerful leader, and she was the one that pulled this group together. She built this. This was her baby. But it was at a point where she needed to let the baby go, right? The baby was now a teenager and needed to kind of go off and do its own thing. And so it was, how do you empower other leaders within your team? How do you give them the tools and resources so that they can be successful? And so that's kind of what it started to morph into. So over a year, we worked together. And what ended up happening was people that were individual contributors that didn't feel they had a voice ended up speaking up more in meetings and felt that they were a bit more empowered. The communication channels actually lessened because they were better communicating in meetings. So they relied less on Slack and email to get information out to each other. They reorganized even how their teams were set up. So it was two distinct teams, and they just reconfigured how that happened. And then the leader actually stepped away a bit so she could do some other things within the organization, and empowered the two heads of those two teams to lead more in the day-to-day. And so when we do assessments. And so when we did the initial assessment, psychological safety was pretty low. By the end of it, the score had gone up by close to 33%. So we were seeing that people felt, right, like they were much more empowered to speak up, that they could challenge each other. They had better relationships with each other. Trust was there because they weren't just relying on Slack or something else, right? There's other means of communication where things could get misconstrued. And so we really spent the time with them, making sure that it was consistent and that they had the tools in place to be able to continue the work even after, I stepped away. And so I think that's one of the cases that I look to, even though that was a small team. It was a very powerful way to look at what they thought was inclusion really was psychological safety, and providing people with the opportunity to have the tools and the resources and support that they needed in order to be able to speak up and not fear, like when I speak up, that I won't be challenged.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think it's really important to reflect too. Like you said, you were in that organization for over a year. This program takes a year, but also humans are so individual, and we are neuroplastic, and we can learn new skills, but we need to have an understanding of what's going on so that we can make changes.
Yeah.
So along that vein, if an organization, how would they kind of know that they might have problems with psychological safety? Like you said, so often they think it's something else.
Yeah.
Like it could be productivity or burnout or stress, which all, it's all in, we're humans. So there are so many things. It's not just one thing. But what would be like some signs and symptoms that your organization needs your training?
Yeah. So one of the things that I always say to people is, people don't come in, or rarely do they come in and say, you know what, I don't feel psychologically safe.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't know what it is.
It's rare. Like I've probably had one person say that to me, and when I asked them what that meant, they were just like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But when we talk about, trust or open communication, do they feel included? Do they feel like they belong? Do they feel that when I say trust too, do they trust leaders? Do they trust the organization? Do they trust their teammates and peers? Is there mutual respect? Those are the things that I think people see. And so what that looks like, or how that can manifest, is you may have people, and I used to do this all the time because there was a lack of trust that I had with certain leaders, was after we have a meeting, I'm documenting everything that we talked about, right? Because I don't trust that you're going to do or say, or you're going to misinterpret what I did or said. And I want to make sure that it's clear, like I have documentation. So you'll notice people documenting things a lot more. You'll notice that if people are taking a lot of mental health days that typically don't, they're starting to shut down. When we talked about quiet quitting some years ago, it's still happening. And people are doing what they need to do to take care of their mental health. And if it's someone who always seems to be like, you know what, I just need to step away, there's some red flag, there's some trigger that is taking place that's making them feel like they cannot be in that environment. Now, I will caveat that and say that there's oftentimes that there may be something happening outside of work in someone's personal life that may be impacting how they're showing up at work too. So part of the work that we do is also talking about emotional intelligence and understanding how to read the room and knowing the people that are a part of your team. So when they do something that is a little bit off, you understand what the norm is and what's something that may be a little bit different for them. Like you have that amount of nuance with them. Another thing that you will see is everyone just agreeing, right? It's just easier to agree. Yep. Okay. Yep. Any feedback? Nope. We're good. Like you'll start to, and it's like, okay, no one has anything to say. No. Mm-mm. Yeah. Right. So that should be a red flag too. Okay. Why is it that no one has anything to say? Is it that it's such a phenomenal idea that no one has something to say? Did I come in as the leader with the idea and people just are automatically think that's what we're going to go with because it was my idea? So we give people tips and tricks to be able to get ideas, get people talking so that those ideas are circulating. And me as the leader don't always have to have the answer. So those are some of the things that I think people will start to see around, okay, maybe people aren't psychologically safe here. Maybe this isn't the best environment. Maybe I'm doing something as the leader that I may need to tweak, or it may be some type of interaction happening within the team itself that me as the leader am not necessarily seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important. And it's very, I don't know when I talk about cortisol and stress and all that. And in the last 4 or 5 years, so we all know the traditional like fight, flight, freeze, but now fawning is included in that. And people are like, what is fawning? And I'm like, fawning is people pleasing or appeasement. And usually when I'm explaining it, I was like, it's in a workplace situation. It's when exactly what you said, you're disagreeing, because as humans, we're humans. We don't want whatever the consequence of stepping up or like giving our feedback. We can only handle so much stress. So it sounds like what you're saying is listening to the communications and your humans and your employees. And when they're not acting like humans anymore, then that's probably when you need to look at something deeper, and they might not know the term that it is psychological safety that they're working or that they need help with, but just keeping an eye on how your humans are interacting. And if they're being out of character, or yes, of course, they could have life stuff going on because we are humans and we're not AI bots yet. Yeah. But just, I think also having that relationship for leadership to ask their people about their life. Like work life is great. Talk about work life, but be authentic, be inhuman. How are your children? How is your family? How is your life? How is your vacation? Like the more relationships you can build with your culture that you're creating, then it's easier to recognize these things quicker and easier to step in. And then also for that human to talk to their leader or manager and say, whoa, like there's something going on. I think
you know what? It's so important. I'm so glad you said that. It's human-centered, right? Remember that there's humans, and there's so many people, and I experienced this as well, right? You have a one-on-one with your manager and it's very task-oriented, right? It's very robotic. It's okay, I got these tasks done. This project's kind of in the works. I'm working with this person. Like it's an update of the work with 2 seconds of, okay, so how are you doing? What if we were to reverse that? Like, or at least make it more 50-50, right? And the question that I coach people I coach leaders all the time. One of the questions that I have them ask their teams or the people on their teams is, how can I best support you? And one, they're like, oh, I can ask that question. Absolutely. You can ask that question. Like, yes, because that's your role, right? You're supposed to be able to support the folks on your team. Mm-hmm. 2, a lot of leaders assume that they know what's best for the people on their team. And so they go off of those assumptions, which may or may not be correct. And that's often seated in what they needed when they were at that point. Not everyone is the same. Third, it forces that person on the other side to actually think about what it is that they need. Right. So then the response is, you know what? I'm not quite sure what I need. Okay. So the next time we meet, let's start with that. Take some time, think about what it is that I can do to best support you as you're going, let's say for the next 6 months. And let's start talking about that, how I can best support you. What are the obstacles that are in your way? Who are the people that you want to get connected with? Those types of things. And it starts to connect people in a way like, wow, I'm actually being seen and valued. And, I see how I fit into the puzzle.
Yeah.
And so that's that human connection piece. And I think that is so important in all of this. And so that's the psychological side of this work.
Yeah. No, I love that. I do a lot of work. My passion is ADHD, but a little more broad than that is neurodiverse. And I was like, with that characteristic, it's 20% of the workforce. And for them, as much as you may know about ADHD, but like that person needs, desire, support system is going to be absolutely different from another person who has exactly the same condition. So it is, I think that's really important. And that always, of course, starts with leadership, but asking the humans, how can I support you? What do you need? And as I heard you said, like, they're like, whoa, we can ask for that. Yes. Because what we are good at, but there's so many other things that maybe we need someone else to do, to delegate, or we might need some more hand holding or a checklist or like there's so many things, but I love that.
Things, and I think I had was working with one organization, and one person, their need was, I just want the opportunity to be able to speak at a meeting, right? Like to be able to present, but they were terrified of being able to do that. That allowed that leader to be able to then go into coach mode and help guide that person, right? So the next meeting, I want you to lead it, right? And these are the things, and what do you have issues with, or what do you have questions about? Help guide, and that's all professional development. And so it's really putting leaders in a very different role than historically leaders have been seen as, right? And so we were getting a little bit of pushback of that from higher entities right now. But what is really working is that human element will always be there. The human element will never change. And what will make organizations successful is how do you tap into that, regardless of AI or any other technology.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you said shift into coach mode. Because one of our programs, we have a program called Be a Good Coach, and we teach leaders how to coach. Because my background is in high-level athletic coaching and how to create climates of success. So we do that in organizations. But it is very different of more of a support. We're bringing everybody up, where I feel like the old school is like the leader tells you what to do and you just listen. And I love your energy and your vibe of being like, yeah, coaching, you can do both, but you're going to have higher levels of success when you support autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and everybody wins. I always like to say it's like a sports team, not a family,
It absolutely is. And in my presentation that I'm doing at the conference, I have a slide that I got from the Maslow Center for Learning. And they've changed the name since then. But it talks about what employees expect from leaders in the post-pandemic workplace is them to act as leaders, as mentors and coaches. Mm-hmm. And we're really good at the mentor part, and we suck at the coaching part. So I talk, I too have work around how can you learn some coaching skills to at least start to ask the right questions, because you don't have to have all of the answers. So getting people into that mode of asking the right questions so that you can encourage people to get to the answers that they need.
I love that. Okay, well, let's encourage people to come to your session, and you can still register and you can come there live, but I believe there's also virtual tickets. So Sacha, tell us when your session is.
So I actually have a pre-conference session. So it's on the 21st. I believe it's at 1 o'clock. Let me double check that. It's at 1 o'clock from 1 to 2:30 on the 21st. I am very excited about that because it does really lay the groundwork for psychological safety in the workplace. I also talk about how it ties into inclusion and belonging, because a lot of organizations are now focusing on inclusion and belonging. And I talked about the assessments here a little bit, and I do talk about, our assessment that focuses on psychological safety and inclusion and how it measures what people experience every single day. So you can get to tactical ways to approach how to solve those problems versus theory. So I'm really excited about that session and being able to meet everyone on the 21st.
That's so awesome. And measurement is so important. I do personal training. I've done personal training for over 2 decades. And it's like, humans don't remember when they weren't good. So for instance, on the Bosu ball, if you've never stood on a Bosu ball, you stand on it and your whole body is shaking. And within a few weeks, I have them on like one leg balancing. I'm like, remember when you couldn't stand on there? And they're like, no. Because humans don't remember, but if you measure it, then you can measure your success. So I think assessments are amazing, and there's not a lot of them out there for psychological safety. So amazing. And then my session is it's a business showcase, and we're talking about the 8-year success we've had at Denver Public Schools. That's going down on the 23rd, which is Thursday at 11:15 in room F1, F2. So if you're there, come see my session too. And thank you so much for being here. I love what you were doing. I think it's so important. And I love the way that you're approaching it from a coach and expertise standpoint. So way to go. Keep up the good work.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to meeting you.
It'll be great to see you in real life.
Yes.
Okay. And